Okay, so let me show you folks something. Just in terms of some of the things we might be seeing in Tlingit, because we're reaching the point where we're recognizing more and more stuff, and it's going to it leads to questions and ideas, and that's exactly what we want. So for example, you've got this Yanagut, right? So this is
oh yeah, okay.
Edit spelling. Okay, so the singular they are walking, right? So, and it's happening right now. It's happening right now. And so there's some things that you can do, like yan chagut, I am walking, and yanigut, you are walking. So the place that things are changing is right. So if we just sort of broke apart what we're looking at, we have ya, and then we have na, and in this case we have 0, 0.
Oh.
Good. So these are the invisible behind the scenes types of things that you're seeing. So if we were to sort of say this is kind of along, and then this thing is there's some different debates going on right now about what to call this thing, right? And so right now I'm going to call it a na mode, right? And well, all it means is it's just sort of like, it's like the ed thing in English. Like, what is ed, the ed part? Like when you say like talked, that ed, what does that ed mean? It's like, well, it kind of has a function more than an actual meaning, but it does have kind of both. So there's this set of things that pop up kind of right in this spot of the verb. And I'll show you some illustrations of that. And that's where you do a bunch of, there's just certain combinations of things. And once you get those combinations, like in this case, the magic formula here is you're going to have ya or k or yay. And then you're going to have na, and then your verb root, right? So that's kind of the magic combination there. There's a couple other parts, but we'll get to those later. For now, you just remember like this ya plus the na is what means it's something that's in the process of happening right now. And there's some verbs that like there's just a straight happening right now. But then there's other ones. This is very similar to the ing in English. So you could say, there's certain verbs where you could say, where it needs that ing, I'm talking, I'm eating, I'm walking, reading, right? So it's a very similar type of thing where like it's something that's in the process of happening. And so when you move it out into like a perfective, which is basically a past tense, the ya and the na go away, right? So they say, oh, well, we don't want that anymore. Now what we want is this thing, which is saying, let's talk about it in terms of whether it's happened or not. So then these three, oops, let me put them back together. So we had yanagut, yanchagut, and so if we did the same thing here, oh, I didn't finish. This is the subject. So that's a singular they. And then this is the classifier. And then walk or go. So it's kind of the different pieces that you have, right? And so all these pieces they smash together. And so what happens here, all these things are all the same meaning. But if we go down to this one changes to cha. That's where I am. This is the I, right? And then if we wanted to look at the yanigut, this changes to I. That's you. Cha is I, I is you, and it's unmarked for a singular they. Okay, so that's the yanagut, yanchagut, yanigut. So that's using this, it's like a little formula, right?
Jeez.
We call it, okay. And so you hear yan a lot, but it's not actually yan, because there'll be other verbs where it's going to be, for example, if I wanted to say they, a singular they are getting to, they're starting to know it. They are starting to know it. I would say ya anas quain. All right. And this doesn't look, yes, this looks pretty different from this verb, ausaku, but it's the same verb. It just changes its shape quite a bit, but there are predictable things that are going on in here. And so this is why for the second edition of Beginning Tlingit, we're kind of rearranging it so that some of this stuff is kind of at the end of the book. It used to be in the weather thing where you started to say like, it's starting to rain, it's starting to get warm, it's starting to get cold, that kind of stuff. So when you trade this part, ya and na, k and na, ye and na. So I'm going to exchange those for this y, just that y. That's what I want to do. So then these same verbs, they become wugut and huagut and yigut. So now they walked, I walked, you walked, right? And so the stuff that's going on here, this is what's under the hood. Now you have this perfective marker, which is this, it usually is a W. It's almost always a W, but sometimes it is a Y. So then this is what makes it what in English we call past tense. If it already happened, then you're going to have that perfective marker in there. And so you got that. And then here's the 0 again. Now the classifier has changed from 0 to ya, because the classifier changes to mark that we're talking about it actually happening. That's one of the big things the classifier does. Happen, didn't happen, happen, didn't happen. It'll do that quite a bit. And then we're going to go back to goot. So similar to the last one, let me try and get all these on the same page. So now we've got wugut, huagut. So now this changes to cha, just like it did before. And this one changes to I. But then with Tlingit, there's some things that just sort of, they are pretty regular and predictable. When you get y plus cha, this y actually kind of jumps over the other side. And then you get hua. That's just something that happens. For all the other ones, you know, it stays in the front.
And where does the classifier show up in wugut? I don't see it.
Yeah, so that's why this is long. Because y plus nothing plus ya gets you woo. And the way we know that, because if you said didn't walk, you get kleshwugut. And so now it's short, because now you get klesh, and then you get y, and then you get and then you get 0, 0. And this is where it gets really funky, because at Tlingit, there's a bunch of stuff where you don't say anything. But sometimes we'll tease it apart and we'll mark it just so we're like, don't forget that thing's there. And if it shifts, and that's the spot where it's got to shift in terms of switching to me doing it or someone else doing it.
I've been screwing that up for a while now. Nila Torah has cleared it up for me earlier in our practice group.
Wow. So
We're
good.
all gonna have these little spots. We all got these spots. I still got all kinds of stuff where I'm like, it's just like, it's exactly like this. The other day, this for me anyways, I do this kind of stuff all the time. I went down to the garage and I had like a cup of coffee and something to throw in the garbage and like something, you know, so then I was like, okay, set the cup of coffee down and then lift the thing up and then throw the garbage in there. Right. And so I had to sing with like different hands doing, but I knew exactly what I was going to do. But I opened the thing up and then I grabbed the cup of coffee and I was going to put that in the garbage for whatever reason. And so there's a bunch of stuff where it's like you kind of know it, but then you revert back to these. Sometimes you're reverting back to habits, and sometimes your brain's just like, okay, we're doing that thing. Okay, let me do the other thing. And you're like, hold on. But with language learning, there is a scholar named Michael Yellowbird, Dr. Michael Yellowbird. He talks about this stuff too, is you're burning new pathways in your brain. You're literally doing that by shifting to another language. And so there's a bunch of different techniques that he talks about. So part of it is the repetition, that being totally okay with like finding, you're always going to find stuff that you mess up on. And that's just part of language learning because you don't know how to do it. It's complex with a bunch of moving parts. And so there's certain things and the more you do it, the easier it becomes. Like you'll be sitting here 2 years from now going, oh yeah, I remember that thing was like so hard for me. That's so weird, because it'll be naturalized by that point. But the only thing, it's sort of like, you know, I got a bunch of different illustrations I'll show you this semester to just keep thinking about the grammar part of it. But once you learn how to do this stuff, then you got it. Then you could just switch then what you're really doing is you're changing this root, and then you just look at what the classifier is, and you become a pattern builder. You just become a master pattern builder. And it does happen, but it's you gotta get through the clunky phase for a while.
Geez.
Any other thoughts or questions on this stuff? Maybe we'll go back to some pictures of this stuff too. So. Was talking about this presentation. So as Ida, Heather Burge, and I, we were teaching a couple summers ago, I can't remember, when could we still travel and be among people? It's like all distant memory at this point for me. But we were in Carcross and Teslin. We've been doing these sort of language camps in the interior for the past probably 5 or 6 years now, although we didn't do it last summer, obviously. But we would usually do these 3-week intensives where we'd go about 6 hours every day, 5 days a week. And it was really fun. But then we just sort of started thinking about just continuing to think about how we present the verb and just getting folks to just think about it. You start to recognize a bunch of things. Like when you look at this, you should say, oh, those 2 blocks are the classifier. And these 3 blocks are the stem, right? Or the root. And so shayech means build it. That's what the verb literally means. You're commanding someone to build something. And then when we say that means the way that people use our language. And so I continue to come back to this stuff. Like you can only memorize so much. At some point, you've got to understand what's going on under the surface of the language so that you can begin to just move that stuff around. So whenever you're putting a verb together, you're going to build a prefix and a stem. You're going to just learn how to, okay, what's this part? Then what's this part? Then smush them together. You made yourself a verb. And so within the prefix, you have transitivity, which is just a fancy word for saying who did it, And who did it happen to? Who to whom, right? That's all that means. Is there a subject there? Is there an object there? You know, like it can rain, but people don't make it rain unless they're throwing money around. But those are the things. And when you look at a verb in Tlingit, when you look it up in the dictionary, especially the newer resources, it'll show you, if you see that capital O, there's an object, and you would have to do something to remove it. So don't forget that it's there. If there's a capital S there, there's a subject and you can't remove it. So don't forget that it's there. And if there's not, then you can't put it into that verb, right? It's just kind of built into the verb. Then there's these things we call thematic prefixes, which is basically a noun that's just attached to the verb. For example, there's a verb, shawachich, which means to club something in the head. And the sha is built into there, right? And I could say, awagwash, somebody hit it or somebody stabbed it. But if I said yawagwash, that puts a face on there. That means somebody punched someone in the face, right? So you can put those things right on there. Sorry, I don't know why my verbs are always so violent. We got to get like some more like love you. I don't know. Whatever. Okay, so then there's the conjugation parts. And this is where these things happen in a certain sequence. It's like a little decoder key. This plus this plus this, oh, you're doing a future thing. This plus this, oh, you're doing a hortative thing. This plus this, oh, it's this. And we got names for all of them. And some of the names are kind of fancy. And I go back and forth. The Mohawk, they just sort of, they took the linguistic terms out of their language and they just say, oh yeah, this is the past tenser or whatever. They just give it like a name based on like kind of what it does. But we'll keep looking at those. And the biggest thing we're learning now is saying now, in the past, in the future. So we're just going to look at those three sort of basic areas. The classifier is also an important thing, and that marks a few different things. It could sort of it could do a couple of different things. Like this didn't just happen; somebody made it happen, right? So I could say yak a, it's good. Yishik a, you made it good. You improved it. Yeah, and so. And that classifier changed from a 0 group to an L group. And we saw this as well. So you could say, Yechat yati. That's how I am, right? But I could say, Shukach adechat siti. That yati changed to siti, because the other thing a classifier could do is said, it's actually one of these groups. It's part of a group. And so it puts things in, it's a classification system. The other thing the classifier does is it marks whether or not it has happened or not. So that's the other thing. So when you say yak a, the ya is the classifier. When we say kesh uk eh, it's not good, then the 0 is then the classifier. Within the stem, that's where you get the meaning, right? So a means good. Gut means walk. Ach means to hear or to listen. Teen is to see. And so what you'll see is like Tlingit builds a verb just by adding more of these things on there. Then,
on the stem, you know, and I know part of it just takes practice, but you know, like when I'm going to learn to look up, especially in the dictionary, and you want to go to like the stem, right? Is there any tips around identifying this stem in words that you don't know what it is?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we're gonna do some exercises this semester where we're just spotting we spot the verb. Then the next step is spot the stem and spot the classifier, right? And then because the stem, it can have some things attached to it. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind with spotting it. One is, once you think you've seen it, the vowel is going to change in almost all of them, right? So it's going to be either short and high, like gut, or it's going to be long and low, gut, or it's going to be long and high, gut. So once you've spotted it, like if we went back to that, maybe I'll just add it here somehow. So if we saw this yana gut, right? And that was our, let me try to make that a little bigger. So if yana gut was the verb that we saw, then we'll learn how to spot that. Okay, gut, that's gotta be the verb root. And when I look it up, I'm gonna always look it up long and low. So even if it says gut, I'm gonna go look for gut. So that's what I'm gonna look for. So today we're gonna take a look at a few other speeches. And then when we look at those speeches, we'll just pick some of those verbs and look them up. And so that's one of the ways to continue to use the translated materials like hashuka and hatuwu nagu yis is just go through and read it, and then sometimes go through and just circle all the verbs. Yeah, that's a verb, that's a verb, that's a verb. And you're just training yourself to see it and to hear it. And then go back in and say, okay, let me find all the verb roots. And so a couple of things that does make it tricky is, so here's yana gut, right? And so we had this other one for they are getting to know it.
Right.
Right. And so ya anas queen. And you're like, well, where do I look up queen? And so the verb here, what am I looking for? All right, I'll just use it. There it is ku, right? And I'll show you another one. So if you saw this verb, ye na teach, then that one is T. So it's sort of like you just start learning more and more and more things. Tlingit always has more prefixes. So there's more stuff before this root than after it. But there are suffixes out there. So if you put a suffix on something, it's going to change the shape of it. It's going to change the way it looks. And if it's open, it's going to close it. And some verbs, when they close, they go through a little bit of a change. So an OO verb, when it closes, will go to WEI. That's just something that happens. So aushiku would be they wiped it, but they did it with a qoina. So qoin, ya anna qoin, right? There's another one. Let's say you got a pod of killer whales, and this pod of killer whales is, they went, let me just copy and paste. So this pod of killer whales, they swam to a place all in a pod. Adeyawagu. The pod of killer whales went that way. But if they're doing that right now, oops, what did I do? So here we have Ade Yawagu. But if they're doing it right now, you're gonna get Ya Yanagwain. Just like there's a song where they say, Ye ya Yanagwain he de kite hey hey, and it's built right in there. That means they're moving they're swimming in a pod, right? And so that we'll keep sort of looking at it, and we'll just practice, and we'll practice together. So we'll just sort of take a look at a sentence, read it out loud, look at the translation, because the nice thing, it's already translated for you. But then one of the steps for the intermediate learner is to say, okay, here's the Tlingit, here's the English, Can I figure out how to get there? And that helps you to sort of look at all the little parts that are in there.
Say again when the ku becomes quang.
So when this closes, so if
Thank
you
you.
put a suffix on it, it's going to close it. So if it's a CH or an N, then it's going to close.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Knastish.
And let me put these on the other sheet so I don't lose them. I'll put the notes up. And down the Gwen, and this one. Okay. Then it doesn't matter if we get them a little bit mixed up. It's fine. I do it. But technically, when I say the root, I'm talking about like tea or goot. And what we're talking about when we say root is what that word means. When we talk about stem, we're saying what is the vowel doing? Because you might have gut, goot, goot, right? And so we're just keeping track of that vowel and what it's doing, because that vowel will change in predictable ways. But that's the tricky part of Tlingit, is you've got like 4 or 5 things going on at the same time, and they each have several different variations. So, okay, any questions? Everybody, just a little quick check-in. Everybody okay? Okay, well, let me open the chat just in case. So I spent the past several years just making lots of different illustrations to try and think about how to, because for me, when I draw pictures of stuff, it helps me understand it. And so just thinking about, and it's kind of abstract to pull this stuff apart, right? But this is what we looked at. So here, here's the stem. It has a root. Here's the classifier. Here's the subject. Here's the conjugation stuff. You might have a thematic stuff right here. Here's an object, and here's the preverb, right? So we got little names for all these things, just like so we could talk about what kinds of things go into those spots, right? So a verb will always have a classifier and a stem. It always has to have that. All this other stuff it could be added, right? It could be there, but it doesn't have to be there. The other stuff, those 2 things, the classifier and the stem, have to be there. But sometimes the classifier is 0. So for example, they are sleeping. A single person is sleeping. You'll say ta, and it's a very short verb. It's a very short verb, but that means they're sleeping right now. So what we start doing when we start just sort of looking at verbs is I'm going to talk to you about classifier, talk to you about the stem and the root, the other things, but then we're going to just start sort of changing these things. Like, let's focus on this. Like, what do we, just to say, I do it, you do it, they do it, we do it, y'all do it, they plural do it, people do it, right? So we start using that and see what happens. What happens when we start changing that? And it is predictable. Like, I think it's a good idea to just have like an illustration like this and just carry it around with you. Just carry it around, right? And so we tried to make I made one that was really tiny, but then you can't read it because there's too much stuff. And you know, everyone's got their little magnifying glass trying to figure it out. But if you could just, or keep it sort of at a spot you could find on your phone. So you could just pull it up. So you could just sort of, once you hear a verb, like if they're talking about to drag something and you find out that it's goed, then you can say, oh, hwa goed, watu goed, ye goed, ye goed, our goed, wadu goed. And this is what's changing right here. Or if we want a simpler one, eating it right now. Chacha. Oh, let me get rid of this thing. Chacha. Tucha. icha, yicha, acha, ducha. And so that we're just practicing moving through these. So this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's all the subjects. It has to be one of those 6. Who's doing that thing? So then you just start remembering this one. Ha is I. Tu is we. I is you. Ye is y'all. The unmarked one is the singular they. And then du is someone. And so we're going to look at some verbs and just practice doing that. So we're going to practice changing this subject today, and then learning eating, drinking, kicking. We'll look at a few different verbs. And then once we sort of see there's a certain pattern, then we should be able to take a pretty good guess on how to change that part. But I think it's helpful to just have this visual handy. So you just look it up like, oh yeah, okay, it's a tu, that's what it is. And you'll find some of them that might be a little more tricky to remember than others. In the word order, you're gonna say the object first, who it happens to, who it happens to. So let's see, what's gonna happen? Let's just say to be good. We'll just start with there's certain state verbs. So the verb is yak'e, right? So that's the good, right? So I am good. Khat yak'e. We are good. Ha yak'e. You are good. Iyak'e. Y'all are good. Yiyak'e. Some or they are good, the singular person. Yak'e.
Okay.
Right. So that's the other thing with Tlingit is once you start talking about this, I'm talking to you about this other person, there's a lot of unmarked stuff that's there. It's really interesting. So different from English. That's why for a lot of people, duh just pops up right there because they want something to be there. And then people are good. Ka yak'e. Something is good. At yak'e.
Okay.
And then there's this one, which we'll look at later, but this is, Tlingit does mark something to the self, like, so like, and we'll learn how to put these into combinations, right? So like the love verb is really good. So I could say, I, cha, se, chan. And that becomes ich sechan. But there's that. I could say, yich sechan, kuch sechan. Right? And so what we're going to do this semester is we're just going to walk through a whole bunch of them. Just repeat. And you will start to see the pattern. And then what you learn how to just sort of, there's like a wheel in your mind to pull up one of these. Oh, y'all. Okay. Then me. Yuch satin. I see you. I see y'all. Right? But this self one would be shchodzatin. I saw myself like in the mirror. I saw myself in this Zoom. Right?
So it's sh and ha.
Yeah. So SH, so this is an object, the self. So I could say, like you could say shchodzachan, but that's an egomaniac. Like, I love myself, right? It's just,
Yeah.
that's the narcissist, right? So, but yeah, this SH, you're gonna see it in some places though. And there's another one, like, so when we learn these pronouns, right? So a subject does the verb. An object, the verb happens to them. A possessive is like, they're the ones who have a relationship or own that thing. But there's one of these that's a possessive one. That's why you say, shtu chash tu. I'm teaching it inside myself. That's what studying is. So whenever you have Shtu, there's something to the self that's going on. And sometimes you'll see that SH as chush, right? Okay, good stuff. So then there's stuff that can pop up right before the verb that will change the verb. So we consider it part of the verb. So it's always a question like, well, if you remove that, does it really change the verb substantially? Then yes, and it's built in as part of the verb. So you can put chush in front of the verb. And so you could do something to yourself. You could talk to yourself, right? I could say, chush in you. I'm talking to myself. Then the whoosh could pop up, and that means to each other. And just continuing to think about that, right? Whoosh tutzechan, we love each other. That's nice. Wooch in is a little bit different. Wooch in means together. So the example could be wooch in tu cha, we're eating together. But if you said whoosh tu dacha, we're eating each other. I'll have a finger and, you know, whatever the cannibals might do to each other. But just thinking of like how these work. So whatever you want to think about, but basically you've got these little wheels and you're just picking something from the wheel, and the word order is different. So we got to keep that in mind. Who it happens to, who does it, and then the verb. Any questions? So let's look at this subject. We're just going to practice this subject. Who is doing it, right? For all the whole bunch of verbs like chwaseku, chwagut, like you know a bunch of verbs by now, but now we're going to just look at sort of the pieces that are in there that you're already using. So here's our verb. I should change these to the root. So here's cha, which is to eat. And sometimes we'll put a little number symbol up there like that. It's not math. It's just saying there's another cha, which means to paddle, like to paddle a canoe. That's all. It just marks that there's some root out there that sounds exactly the same. And so that's all. So this one is eating. So when you look up a verb, this is what you just get used to decoding this information so that you can use this verb. And some people used to get kind of upset when this stuff was kind of first coming out, especially over the past 10 to 15 years. We sort of really made a lot of shifts in how the verbs are documented and taught. And some people were kind of getting upset saying, you're making it too complicated. You're making it more complicated than it is. But I think there's a lot of stuff going on. And what we're just trying to show you is just a code. Pick an object from that list. Pick a subject from that list. The classifier is 0. It's going to be either 0 or ya. It's going to be one of those two. And then it's cha. There's the verb root so you can clearly see it. You learn a little bit more about this stuff. We're not going to worry about the 0 or the act right now, but you'll learn about it. And then it says for the subject to eat object, right? So this is one where the object is usually third person, unless you're going to talk to your hamburger or whatever. Right? It's just probably not going to. There's stories though, like some monster comes. I'm going to eat you all, and people get scared. So looking at this, the classifier, right? You got this chart with all these different options. All you got to remember is we're right here. It's either me 0 or ya, 0 or ya. And the magic is didn't happen, happened, didn't happen, happened, didn't happen, happened. That's all it does. That's all it does right now. Okay, so yeah, if it happened. And that's usually only the perfective. Almost all of them are a 0. And so And when we say happened, like even if it's happening right now, for a lot of verbs, it's like, well, it's happening. It's not, it hasn't happened yet because it's happening. And Tlingit thinks about this stuff an awful lot in the Tlingit brain. And so we'll look at some examples. So what we're looking for here is the do it. That's a command. Doing it. We call that imperfective, which just means it is happening right now. Did it, that's the perfective. And will do it, that's the future. So we're not going to do any negatives right now. They change things, and we will get to them. But you know, like in English, you say it did not, right? So you just add not in there, right? Or ate, did not eat, right? So, but for Tlingit, there's a few other things there's a couple other things that go on. So, and it's okay if we don't know. Does anybody know or want to offer up a guess on how to command somebody to eat it? Those, if you got any like picky kids around. Somebody say it?
Ha.
Yep. So it's a short, so you say, ha, ha, ha. And there's an object on there. So you're not saying get something to eat. You are saying eat it. Like you're sitting there with a picky kid, right? Sometimes you get a picky kid. He's like, eat it, eat your food, ha, right? But then sometimes you're just sort of, it's something you can just say to someone, right? Like if someone comes to visit, because we're done with COVID, it's been retired, and there's some yummy salmon on, you know, oh, cook, right? I come into your house, I'm like, oh, dry fish is really yummy. I say, go ahead, eat it. Okay, so here we got 1, 2, 3. Me, you, someone else.
Okay.
Right? I'm talking about myself. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about them. That's all it is. So we should expect cha, I, 0. Cha, I, 0. Cha, I, 0. Every single time. Very predictable. So I am eating it. Anybody know it?
Ha.
Yeah, oh, ha ha. Ha ha. Ha ha. So this cha right here, this first one is going to change to I. And when I in count, and so this right here shows you what the classifier is. 0, 0, yeah, 0. And I plus a 0, we should get E. So what's this one going to be? You are eating it.
Hija.
Yeah. Oh, hija. Hija. Hija.
Hija.
Hija.
So going back to this sheet, there is what this green line kind of tells you is a single third person is usually unmarked. Yake, they are good. However, if you have a third person object and a third person subject, this will become a. That is, and that's just something you gotta keep in mind. So sometimes if you hear a verb, like I could say, in kachwanik, I told you about it. But if I was gonna say, they told you about it, in akawanik. So that pops back up there, right? It pops up. So that in mind, they are eating it. The singular they.
Singular. Ha.
Aha.
Acha. 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 And so what I'll do is for tonight's class, I was going through a bit of a shift, so it might take the weekend. The class, I upload it to our blog, and it might go a little slower today. We'll see. But I'll put this entire slideshow up, so I'm not trying to hide any, and you could practice it, right? And this is good practice, and that way you could practice with yourself and just reveal it one page at a time and guess. And you do the guesswork, and it's totally okay if it's wrong. It doesn't matter. Nothing bad. The walls don't fall down, and nothing shameful happens, right? You gotta kind of do the thing so that you can figure out what are the things that you need to sort of keep practicing. So when you have 0, so you have 0, 0, cha, and that's what's under the hood, and that's why you have to have cha. But this is going to be present in all of this category. Okay. Okay. Everybody okay? Any questions? I ate it. So we did walking, which was hua. So we should have that exact same beginning, and we substitute the stem. Yeah. Okay.
Ah.
Oh.
Huacha.
Waha.
Huacha.
Waha.
At some point later, I'm going to talk to you about a set of rules that will tell you why this is long and high. But that's what it is. That's what it'll be here. That's what it'll be here. It'll also be long and high right here. Okay. So what you're learning to do is just prefix stem. And so hua is I did. Hua is I did. Right? Now, you ate it. So the hua needs to go away. So this hua gets substituted. And so, and this one, I'm going to tell you folks about something here. Let me just show you what it is. Iyacha.
Yaka.
Iyacha.
Yaka.
Iyacha.
Yaka.
So you've got two kind of options with the second person in the perfective. You're going to have ye or iya. And the answer sort of comes back to this. This thing says 0. When this thing says 0, it's usually going to be iya. All the other ones will be ye. And you'll learn about some of the reasons why. Yeah, so you say yegut, right? Because that's not a 0. But I could say iyagut. And so there's some stuff that goes on. But as we learn more Tlingit, it's like we just keep pulling the curtain back, and there's a great big machine there. We're like, no, don't look at that side. Just look at this little component, right? Okay. But if you could say ichwacha, that is grammatically correct, but that means I ate you, right? Because then the ih would be the object, which you could say to, I don't know what you would say it to.
Chicken.
Yeah, like I guess you could talk to your, I mean, it's gone now. You're talking to the potato, like, hey, potato, I ate you, right? So, okay, so now we've got hua, iya.
Yeah.
The cha is going to be exactly the same right here. A singular they ate it. And it has to have the on the front.
Waka.
Awacha,
Waka.
awacha,
Awaha.
awacha.
Waka.
Awaha.
So here, hua, iya, awa, right? So,
Yeah. Awa.
sheesh. And these are gonna, that's a similar pattern, right? And you're gonna see if it's a zero classifier. Once we change the classifier, it's gonna change a little bit. But for now, like we're recognizing patterns. We're doing a bit of a reveal. Like, does anybody know? And you might not have heard it before. So it's totally fine if you don't know, because that's what we're here for. But then you're gonna see like there are very repeatable patterns in a lot of this stuff. Huacha, huasaku, huagut, huasatin, all of that stuff, right? And it becomes something that you can put together on your own. It truly does. I will eat it. I am going to eat it. Kukwacha, kukwacha,
Waka.
kukwacha.
Waka.
Let me just show you the next one.
Well, before you go there, how did you get that? Sorry.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so let's go back to our little to our worksheet here that we're. Which one was that? Okay, so here, so let's take a look at this goot, right? So there's a subject, there's a zero classifier, and then there's goot, right? So this is walking,
Okay.
right? So for walking, we had a couple of different things. One is we could say yan, cha, gut. And so this is what the form should be for happening right now.
Right.
And then we're going to go hua, gut. And then we're going to go kukwa, gut. Okay.
Mhm.
And there's a number of things. So basically what Tlingit likes to do is there's certain things that need to be activated right in between these two things. Or I guess sort of like kind of just to the left of here. Sorry, it's in between the object and the subject. So right here is where the magic is going to happen. So for this one, the things that you're going to have is ya and then na, cha. The classifier is 0 and then gut. For this one, you're going to have y, cha, ya, gut. So what happens, you have to have the na for this happening right now. That's what that thing does.
Mhm.
It's like you have a little switch box, like turn it that way, and now we're talking about happening right now. Turn the switch to this y, and now we're talking about whether or not it has already happened. And then the ya, that changes because it has happened, right?
Mhm.
Now for this one's a little long. These three things combined will put it into the future. It's just sort of like these three things, ga, ga. That's there for every single future verb that you'll ever use will have that. And so those three things have to be there, and they all pop up in the same spot right here. And then you're going to add cha, and then it's got to be 0, and it's got to be long and high. So because these three things are there, the future mode is actually really predictable. So you're going to have kukwa, kuki, and kukwa. That's going to be first person, second person, third person. The second person, sometimes there's like, you could say it this way or that way. So sometimes there's two different ways to say it. So kaki is another way that the future is used for the second person.
I'll be darned. I never knew about that second person one till now.
Yeah, so kaki, like, and I use these because we work with kids at the language nest, and sometimes you use commands with kids, but other times, anybody know the verb for kind, to be kind?
Tutlian.
Tusha'an, right? So tusha'an, so I could say itusha'an, you are kind, itusha'an. And then, but if I wanted to command somebody to be kind, like, for kids, like when you raise kids, you just gotta boss them around a lot. That's just part of raising kids. Just gotta teach them how to be like humans, right? And so my kids, they know Tlingit really well. And the command form for be nice, be kind is itukshaan. And the challenge there is it sounds a little bit like you have a nice butt. So you would say ituk sha'an, technically, if you really wanted to say that. And so when I was trying to like be real firm with my daughter. I said, ituk sha'an. And she said, what about my butts? And I was like, okay, I'm going to use a future. I'll use a future verb. So sometimes I'll use future verbs. So I'll say, you're going to be nice. You're going to be good. And that's just sort of like a parental, you got choices to make as a parent. You say, don't do the thing, or sometimes you say, do this thing instead of that thing. So, and so what we're going to do is for this exercise, I'm just showing you what they look like and just seeing if you know them. And if you don't know them, there's no big deal at all. And we're going to look at a bunch of different verbs, and then I'm going to give you this whole presentation to practice this set of verbs and just sort of start to master them. Then we get this handbook that's out that just sort of gets you to sort of like, it's a quick cheat sheet to look up the most commonly used verbs, right? And so there's a whole bunch of these. So kukwagut, you've used this one too. Suye ikwasatin, it's right there, kukwa, it's built in. And so you've said these things before, but now what we're doing is we're just sort of looking at what's there so that you can start to shift it, because this is where language, you got to be able to talk about I'm gonna, you're gonna, they're gonna, we're gonna, so you could say, gahtursa, yayidat, we're gonna take a break now, right? So there's the future one for us, right? And so, but then the plan this semester, sometimes we're gonna do some of this stuff, then we'll take a break from it, we'll go do something else. And then, but the strategy is we're just gonna look at a bunch of verbs where you change the subject. Then we're gonna look at a bunch of verbs where you just change the object. Then we're gonna look at some of them, we're gonna change them both at the same time. I love you, I love them, I love, people. And you're just gonna just shift it through. And it's, there's some elders that I was really fortunate to work with where I just wrote them out and I was like, let's get every single combination down. And then we could just show it to people and let them practice. And you practice that stuff over and over. And that's like, a lot of people want to play guitar. And they're like, okay, you got to practice these scales so your hands can get strong and you can practice. And people are like, I don't want scales. I want to play rock and roll all day long. So it's like, well, this is the scales part of being able to talk, is you just got to grind through this stuff. And it sinks in, and languages are big and complicated, but it's like, it's fun because the light bulbs are going to start to go off. And pretty soon it's going to open the door to just saying, oh, I want to know how to say that. Then you'd look up the verb, and now you could put it in all these different modes. You can just do that. For now, let's take a break. Take about, I don't know, let's just come back at a quarter till. How's that sound?
Good.
Hot, hot.
Okay, any thoughts or questions as we come back?
Don't keep us in suspense. I need to know what the rest of the chart looks like.
Take a look. Okay. You are going to eat it. I'll just show it to you. Kaqicha, kaqicha, kaqicha.
Gajiha.
So now let me tell you something. The G can very easily become K. So this one, you have two ways to say it. You could say kaqicha, or you could say kaqicha. So you're just sort of dropping that vowel. But in order to drop that vowel, it switches over to a K. And so you're going to see this sometimes, like there's a program called Ituwukatsin with a K right on the front, because gashatsin is the command form for be strong, right?
Right.
Okay. And then they, singular they, are going to eat it. Akwacha, akwacha,
Akwacha.
akwacha. So this is one, like the first person and third person are sometimes very similar. It's a ka as opposed to a ka, right? So that's the only thing sometimes that separates those things. So you could say adekakwagut or adekakwagut. They are very similar.
Okay.
But again, this has to pop up in that third person. Okay, so everything's been eaten.
Okay.
Now you got to drink, right? So you're going to eat, you got to drink, right? So here is the verb for to drink. There's a different one for sipping. So like if you're doing like coffee or tea, it's usually a little bit of a different verb. This one is usually like to drink. So this is what it looks like. So again, there's an object, there's a subject. So this one, again, the object's going to be third person. But you just need to know that it's there so that you can go in the third person. Subject, so there, that's where that's going to go. Right now we're doing cha, I, zero. Cha, I, zero, right? Me, you, them. Me, you, them. But the classifier is a D plus 0. So this is a little bit different. So it's still the 0 group, but now we have turned on the D component. And I'll show you the classifier chart in a second and tell you what that really means. Na is the root. There's that little number 1. There's another one, which is to apply some sort of lotion or to be damp. That's what the other one is. There's another one, which is to die or to inherit money. So there's at least 3 of the na verb roots. It's another 0. And we'll learn later what that means. An act, we'll learn later what that means. Transitive, that just means there's an object and a subject. It's just sort of a little extra marking just so that we keep remembering that they're there. For S, to drink O. Okay. So here's, oops. Move this little thing down.
Okay.
So
There.
the I in the classifier marks that the verb has happened. The D in the classifier can mark a number of different things. Most commonly, that the subject is also the object. This is something called middle voice, and English doesn't do it. So if there's ever chush or sh right in front of the verb, it'll be plus D. It has to be. Chwadzitin. So I say ichsechan, chat isachan, wush tudzechan. So that's the z. That D sound pops in there. That's the most common reason. Then there's some verbs that are just plus D because you do it and it impacts you. And there's a number of things that are like that. The last thing is sometimes there's an object in there and you could kick it out. And this is kind of an unusual thing. For example, I could say, Huatu, I read it. Like let's say you're my teacher and you're asking about the homework. De Huatu, I already read it. I got it done. But if someone says, what'd you do last night? Huaditu. So the di pops up there. And that means I just read. That's what I did. I read. Same with huaqa. I sewed it. Huadiqa. I sewed. So sometimes you can kick the it out of there, which is a lot to think of. We're not going to worry about it right now, but I'm just telling you what this D is there for. That's the classifier. It's what it does. It says did, didn't. It happened, didn't happen, happened, didn't happen. Middle voice, kicking objects out. That's what's going on there. Okay, so drinking is a plus D thing. It's just interesting that the more you learn about Tlingit, the more you're just going to think about all this stuff, and you can get really deep and philosophical about it if you want to. But for now, we're just going to learn how to say it. Okay, so if you're commanding someone, drink it, do it. Anybody know how to say that?
Idina.
Oh, what happened?
Still eating.
Oh, I went to the wrong spot. Okay, so
Yeah.
I was like, what on earth? Okay.
Itana.
Okay, itana,
Itana.
itana,
Itana.
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 Okay. So we had hua. This is going to change to huade. And then the stem, huade. This one's going to be yide. This one's going to be aude. Okay? I've just given you the answers. So how would I say I drank it? And they're all going to be high. Nah, nah, nah. Oh, wait, no, I'm doing it right now. Dang it, I jumped ahead. Okay, never mind. Okay, so this will be khada,
Khada.
ida,
Okay.
ad.
Khadana.
Okay. Khadana,
Khadana.
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 khadana, khadana.
Khadana.
So what's going to happen is this kha is going to go to I,
Yeah.
and then this kha is going to go to a. That's the process. That's the only thing that's going to change. This na will be the same all the way across. So once you see it in one mode, now you could change it. You don't have to worry about that stem going long or doing anything like that. It'll go long and high for both of these. For now, we're just sort of, we're learning how to say it, and we're just spotting some patterns. That's all we're doing. We're not expected to understand why, but then later we're going to learn why. It's a lot of this is entirely predictable. Idina,
Itana.
Idana.
idina,
Idana.
idina.
Idana.
So this one, the command and the you are doing it now are exactly the same. And adana,
Adana.
Khadana.
adana,
Adana.
Khadana.
adana.
Adana.
Khadana.
So now what's going to happen is khwa, na, ye, de, na, ow, de, na. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Khwadina,
Khwatana.
khwadina,
Khwadana.
khwadina,
Quadina.
Yidna,
Yidina.
yidna,
You do not.
Yidina.
yidna,
Yidina.
Yeah.
audina,
Audina.
audina,
Audina.
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 And if you know anybody from Carcross or Teslin, this W will become an M. They would say umdina. And here's how it works. In the prefix, when you have this perfective, when you have a vowel, then the W, and then a consonant in the classifier, then it'll change to an M. Amsaku, amdina, amdagu.
City.
Would a noun like Galdan change to Gamdan?
Yes. And not
Is
all,
it the same rule?
but no, that one's just sort of like there's a set of them, like gam, but not all of them. There's some these days. Okay. So this one, so we have da, di, da. So it's gonna go back to da, and we should have k, kwa, da, na. We're gonna have ga, qi, da, na, and guh, da, na. This one has it has a rule, and I'll show you. But let's take a look at them. Kwadana,
Kwadana.
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 kwadana,
Kwadana.
kwadana,
Kwadana.
kakidana,
Gagidana.
kakidana,
Gagidana.
kakidana,
Gagidana.
aguchtana,
Aguchtana.
aguchtana,
Aguchtana.
aguchtana.
Kwadana.
So a couple things. If you look at all of these end with a high tone, right? All of them. But that's not always going to be the case. So you have to really make sure, like, because sometimes I'm showing you stuff, I was like, anybody want to take a guess? And if you take a guess in English, you signal it by going like this, but you don't do that in Tlingit, right? So like if you had woogoot, you wouldn't want to say woogoot, because now you're changing the tone, you're altering it using English rules. But so just go for it. You got to guess that tone as well. And it's okay if you're just guessing, because it's fine. That's exactly what we're doing right now. But that's how you signal things in English. You signal uncertainty, guessing, that type of thing by doing the voice raise at the end, but you don't do that in Tlingit. A lot of speakers do. It's just a habit that we picked up from English, but there's other ways you take care of it with particles and stuff like that.
Is that a guch? Is that a guch the same as like gach?
Well, they're both futures, right? So when you look at a future verb, you'll have gachtu. Gachtu is we are going to. Gachtuat, we're going to go. Gachtucha, we're going to eat. Gachtusaku, we're going to know it. Gachtusatin, we're going to see it. Right? So gachtu is always we are gonna. Kakwa is always I am going to. This one can be gaki or kaki. So this ga could change to a K. The third person has two main things. So if we go back, we see akwa, akwa, kha. So you get this akwa. But for this one, you get aguchta. So the key here is there a consonant and vowel in the classifier? If the answer is yes, then this part before it has to be guch. So guchta, guchsa, guchla, guchsha. And that's what we're going to learn as we learn the classifier. We'll see we're primarily mostly changing one thing in here, which is the consonant. The exception is one of them doesn't have a consonant. Again, like you're getting, it's a bunch of stuff. Right now, we're just learning how to say it. Start to practice seeing some of the patterns, getting familiar. These all change and they're pretty different, but they're changing in pretty predictable ways. So now we're gonna cook. We're doing this out. We already ate, we already drank, but now I guess we gotta eat again. So we're gonna cook. Here's what this one looks like. There's an object. There's a subject. It's an S group classifier. So we should expect se or sa. Most of the time, sa. And then here's e. That's the cooking verb. It's a 0 again. It's an act verb. For S, to cook, O. So here we are on our classifier chart. Most of them are going to be sa. And then the perfective will be se. Once it's already happened. So the command form for cook it is sa'i,
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 sa'i.
sa'i.
So now I can give that lovely chunk of halibut to someone and say, sa'i, cook it. Get cooking. I am cooking it. Chasa'i,
Sa'i,
Chasa'i.
chasa'i,
Chasa'i.
sa'i,
chasa'i.
sa'i.
And as we change this, this
Chasa'i.
part is going to stay the same. Well, I'll change a little bit right here. And I'll tell you why. So this is the part we're going to change from cha to I to 0. But once the subject goes to 0, the object will switch from 0 to a. So it's like this weird. It's like these little checks and balances. These little wheels keep turning. You are cooking.
Isa'i.
It's a e.
Sa'i,
It's a e.
sa'i,
It's a e.
sa'i.
Isa'i.
They are cooking it.
Asai,
As'i.
As'i.
as'i,
As'i.
As'i.
So we talked about this classifier being sa or si. So this I, it's like you turn a switch on to turn that letter I on. Activate the I mode because it happened. So the I is really important. If it's there, it cannot get knocked out. But the letter A that letter A can get knocked out of there, which is why it's missing. We would expect asai. But there's a couple of different things like this this third person object If there's no sound in between that and the classifier, it'll knock that letter A right out of there. It's just, it's language cribbage. Tlingit just always has like extra rules. So it's like, oh yeah, we got rules for all kinds of stuff. So this is one. That vowel can get kicked out of there. It happens regularly. But we'll see the si, it doesn't get kicked out of there. Okay. So this one, E, 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 all the way across. This one will also be long and high. So we should expect hua, si, E, ye, si, E, ow, si, E, right? And it's a predictable pattern, even though there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, there's only so many things, right? So here it is. Khwase'i,
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 khwase'i, khwase'i,
yise'i,
yisi'i,
yise'i,
yisi'i,
yise'i,
yisi'i,
Yise'i,
ause'i,
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 ause'i.
Ause'i,
Okay, so now it's going back to sa. So we should expect k, kwa, sa, I, ka, ke, sa, I, and guch, sa, I, right? And that's what we're gonna see. Kkwasai,
Khwasa'i,
Khwase'i,
kkwasai,
Kwasai,
kkwasai,
Shai,
Khwase'i,
kakisai,
Khwase'i,
gagisa'i,
kakisai,
Khwase'i,
gagisa'i,
kakisai.
Gakisa'i.
And this ga can become a K. There's two ways. You get to pick which way you want to say it. Speakers from Tesson, though, pretty much prefer to say it that way. And then aguchsa'i,
Agussa'i,
Gakisa'i.
aguchsa'i,
aguchsa'i,
Agussa'i,
aguchsa'i,
aguchsa'i.
aguchsa'i.
So if we look at this thing, we see sa, chasa, isa, as. Chasa, yisa, ausa. Kakwasa, kakisa, aguchsa. So there's these sort of these variations right here. But we're going to switch to a different verb, and we're actually going to see these and pretty much an identical pattern. The classifier is going to change, so this letter S is going to become an L. But most of the other stuff is going to stay. The patterns are going to be the same, right? So Tlingit, it's a very predictable language. There's lots and lots of pieces, but it's very predictable. You just got to sort of learn what these pieces are and how they start moving when we move the verb around. Any questions? I couldn't find a good graphic for watch it, so I got this creepy guy with laser eyes or whatever's going on here. But the verb itself means to watch something, but it also means to take care of it. So there's a program called Hin Chatini, which means people who are going to watch over the water. Like it could mean you're going to protect it. Adatki Chatini is a word for babysitter. Wasus Chatini would be a shepherd. Or sorry, Wanadu Chatini would be a shepherd. I think Wasus Chatini would be a cowboy, girl, whatever you call it, a cattle herder. I don't know. But the Chatin is and the use of this one, there's a couple different ways to talk about like look at something. But if I saw something and I wanted you to look at it, I could say Chatin, and I'm telling you, like, watch this thing, watch it, right? Like, yeah, okay. So here's what it looks like. Object, subject, L group classifier, teen. So there's multiple teens. There's another one which has, I can't remember what the other one is right now, but another act verb. This is to look at, to gaze at, to watch or take care of, to mind, to look after. Right. So we're going to expect tla and tle. Most of them will be tla, and the perfective will be tle. So here we are. Sha, sha, she, sha. This one will be short and high. So we get, oops, shatin,
Latin.
shatin,
Latin.
shatin.
Latin.
Watch it, right? So maybe I'm cooking something. I'm like, hey, you need to watch this for a second. I'll be right back, right? Shatin, shatin, okay? So these ones are actually going to look very much like this. So they're going to have tin and they're going to have sha. So basically, if we just added a cha right there, we're going to chashatin. We should get ishatin.
Latin.
But this one, just like we saw with the cooking one, where this letter A disappeared, that's going to happen here as well. Okay, so we're going to get tin. Chashatin.
Latin.
Chashatin.
Latin.
Chashatin.
Latin.
Latin.
Ishatin.
Latin.
Ishatin.
Latin.
Ishatin.
Latin.
Ashtin.
Achtin.
Ashtin.
Achtin.
Ashtin.
Achtin.
So here, they get hua, she, tin. Same short and high. Ye, she, tin. Ow, she, tin. Okay. Chashatin.
Latin.
Chashatin.
Latin.
Yishatin.
Yes,
Latin.
Yishatin.
Latin.
Latin.
Aushatin.
Outlatin.
Latin.
Aushatin.
Outlatin.
Here, now it's gonna, because it's every verb in the future, we expect the stem to be long and high. So now we should have k, kwa, sha, teen,
Teen.
ga, ke, sha,
Teen.
teen, a, guch, sha, teen. So we just see it in terms of these syllables. We also see the parts that are there. In every one of these future verbs, you've got ga, ka. It has to be in every one of them. And because of that, you get these repeating combinations. Kakwashatin,
Qualatin.
kakwashatin,
Kakoshatin.
gakishatin,
Kakeshatin.
gakishatin,
Kakeshatin.
agukshatin,
Agukshatin.
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 Okay. So when we come back next week, we'll get to kicking it. So we'll just be fed up with it, kick the computer right out the door. But for now, maybe we'll switch gears for the last part of class. We'll go back to these speeches and just sort of look at that and just sort of read it, point out things that we might sort of be seeing. We've got the translation there. But as far as language learning, sometimes we've got to do some of this formulaic type of stuff. It's an artificial way to use and learn the language, but it does help in terms of understanding what are the specific things that you're doing and how can you just keep, you got to burn these patterns into your brain so that you can recall them. And then you just, what you're going to see though, is they're so similar. Those prefixes are so similar. And then you're just changing the root. That's all you do. You went from teen, goot, teen, e, cha, na. And so that's the process. So through repetition, it does start to sink in, but then sometimes, we did that for, at least an hour. So, but that was good. That was good. Okay. So we did ichtik ish. So here's hatu naguyis. I'm gonna hide that. This is a speech off of a wax cylinder. It was recorded in 1899 in Sitka. So it's just amazing to just sort of look like this is a 120-year-old Tlingit language, right? So just to sort of think about that, and we can still look at what they're saying. So let's do this. So here we are. We don't know who the speakers are, but here, if you can read up to the end of the sentence, if someone wants to take a crack at it. So you read it, then I'll read it, then we'll look at the English, and we'll come back and take a look at what kinds of things we see and what kinds of things we might have questions about. So who would like to read first?
Oi tianagi ahunki.
And the next one, up to the period.
Oh, ide kakwatan.
Hey, wait, kinaki achunki. Yiide chakwatan.
Kakwatan.
You who are standing there, my relatives, I will speak to you. Anything you want to point out or ask about?
That's interesting. So that's how you say I'll speak to you. Kakwatan.
Yeah, so
Kakwatan.
there's the kukwa. We just saw that, so now we see it in action.
Tan all the people.
Well, in this case, tan is like communicate. Like, so you say tani, yuchatungi, it's built in there. It might be related to an empty container, but I kind of look at it as its own root, which has to do with communicating. But then ye is you all, day to you all, right? So there's different ways you could change this. I could say ha day chakwatan. So that changed to an underlined G. That person is going, they are going to talk to us. Ha day chakitan. You're going to talk to us, right? So again, it's just using those same mechanisms we just saw, and we see even 120 years ago, language worked the same way. Wait is from we, and then the T, so like over there. Yanak would be you all are standing right now. So it gets this little wait yanaqi, you all who are standing there. Ach khunki, my relatives.
You know, I get confused on that part with yanagi, because when I think of standing, I think of like han.
Han is one person.
Okay, so
wait ihan, you are standing there. But
I
they're
see.
the plural form. That's why you say gedahan, gaidanak. So there's quite a few, especially if there's any moving involved. It's pretty common that when you have a plural, the verb changes. And there's a similar thing, like if you need phrases for like, if you want to just use the language as a ceremonial language, then there's certain things like you could say, yidat tunak, we're standing around you, and that means we're supporting you, we're helping you, right? Tunak, like we are doing that. But khahan, I am a single person standing here.
As soon as you said that, guy to knock, I was, oh, yeah.
Okay, anybody want to read the next sentence?
I can read it.
Oh, sheesh.
Haya yadat tak de hatu kautlege ye.
Okay. Ha ya yidat tak ade hatu kautlaqi. Well, this last winter, how proud we were. Anything you want to point out or ask about with that one? So the yidat is now. So, and then you have ya yidat talk. So this winter, the winter right now. You could also say ya talk this winter. And you could say ya talk for the other winter. Or you could say way talk, and then that's usually putting some distance between you and that particular time. There's this thing where you have day, and then some verb with I at the end, yeah. And what that's doing, there's a couple steps to this. One is this yeah. That usually means a place. So if I said, Hatuwu yeah, that would mean the place where we felt pride. So like there's different place names. If you look at the place names book, you might see like Anach Andagan yeah, the place where the sun shines across. So this yeah is usually marking a place where this verb happened. And so you get this I and yeah. But if you put a day in front of it, now you're talking about the way this verb happened, right? So I might say, that was really great, the way you talked. So I'm talking about the way the verb happened. So he says, well, now, right now, winter, the way we feel, well, felt, because there's that W, which shows it's perfective. We felt proud. Okay.
Look at that word, Tlingit. Tlingit itself, is that also connected to like Yachlige or Shachlige? Tlingit is something real good.
Yeah, so
and so
the root is like beautiful. So you could say kashaqi atoe. It's a really beautiful looking thing. And then you say shakshaqi, beautiful head. And that's when someone's just like just really good looking, right? Shakshaqi. And then so hatuwu kaushaqi is like a beautiful thought or spirit. And that's how you talk about proud, right? And so to feel pride. And it's pretty good when you're using this to be proud of something, because if someone's like, how you doing? You might be like, gee, really kind of full of yourself there. But you can be proud, like, I'm proud of my son. I'm proud, like, but it's not something that you should never say, but it's something to be careful with, because it could sound like you always gotta be careful that you're not bragging in Tlingit. But yeah, that's is beautiful. Okay, next one. And maybe this might be the last one. We'll see. We'll see. Might get to the next two.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Adat yi idi ide kwan kla wasa hatubu kahwatlige.
Okay. Sheesh. Adat yi idech akwatan. Kahwa sahatu kaushaqe. And we'll look at the English. I will speak to you about it, how very proud we were. So, so the is its, dot is about. So you could say dot, about me, dot, about you, do dot, about that person, them, a dot. And so Tlingit uses an awful lot. And so like we'll name this thing. So this could have been whatever this was. Now this refers back to it, right? So I could say, where they are from, our ancestors. I'm going to talk to you about it. Maybe I'm going to move into some migration story after that, right? So we see this use of repetition as well. Yi de akwatan. This person just said it right there. You all, too, I'm gonna talk. There's the kakwa, showing that I'm gonna. Yi de akwatan. I'm gonna talk to you all. Hatuwu kaushake is similar to this same thing right here, except this one has the y on the end. Kahwasa is how very much. Yak kahwasa achtuwuk shake kach takat yuhan adeyi ne hayukatangi. Yewa yakitak yakahitak takat yuhan. Kushte khwasashid zi ya hayukatangi one kanins. Just kana Aqa away khilsitain qadnay ayah kakakhilaat ye away. Very proud of you all. We're working. It doesn't matter. Sometimes it's difficult, but you keep trying, and then pretty soon it'll be real easy to talk. Let's see. Do you guys want some kind of theme or something to work on over the weekend? Any suggestions to put? Let's just try and string together like 5 to 10 sentences. Let's do something similar to Advanced Tlingit, because Monday is Martin Luther King Day and also Alaska's Civil Rights Day. Why don't you put together 5 to 10 sentences about someone who was a champion for civil rights?
Okay.
Feel free to reach out if you've got any questions or anything, but we're just going to share it, and then we're going to start sort of shifting to starting every class with a little bit of language. And then Tuesday, we're going to try and get ourselves geared up to do most of the Thursday class in Tlingit, and we'll just see how it works. We'll spend the semester just practicing, developing tools and things that will help us to stay in the language, to speak, and to have tools to sort of, it's okay to call for help at any time. Like someday there's gonna be like a Tlingit crisis line. There's be like this red phone, and then we'll just all take shifts, stand by the phone, and it'll ring, and someone says, I need to know how to say, don't eat my hamburger, or just whatever. And then you say, okay, yeah, that's how you say it. All right. So
Lance.
it's got to be shifts. So yeah, not just me. I'll take my shift, but we all got to do it. All right. Wish it got to see in Johan. Ganashish.
Sheesh.
Ganesh.
Gracias.
I had a quick question about this book, Ishi David. Klash Naat Ye U. That was confusing for me because I never seen the ooh.
Yeah. So I go back to this thing I was making notes on real quick.
Maybe I should have asked at the beginning of class, but
It's okay. So we usually know ye awa u, right? So this is usually how we see it. And so the ye part we get, and then you get and then the perfective, and then the third person, and then the ya, which is the classifier, and then we're gonna get the u. But once we go, this is all gonna be, so that's what it is. But once we put klesh in front of it,
It's a negative.
a couple things that need to change. The yay stays the same, the us stays the same, that perfective stays the same, although we do add this u, which we call the irialis, and that marks didn't happen, specifically did not or has not happened yet, right? So that needs to go there. And then the biggest change is this goes to 0. So because that's 0, you cannot have this wa right here that we're used to hearing. So then plus these two, those are the only sounds in the prefix. So when those add together, you end up with oo. And it's pretty unusual. It's not very common, but you would, it's especially because you have oo, right? But you would have something very similar to awacha, and you'd say klesh ucha, klesh ucha. So usually it's just going to switch to a single but in this case, it's pushing it long. So yeah, it's pretty fun. Kesh would be they didn't use it or they didn't wear it. Do not kesh he didn't wear his clothes.
Not ready for all that. Well, we're getting there. We're getting there. Goodness cheese.
Okay. Sehr Kosatin.
Hey, bro, what's your Fridays usually look like? Pretty busy.